Hi, I'm Rose Snyder, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today for Making the Most of Your NAEYC Conference. As I said, I'm Rose Snyder. I am the Director of Member and Educational Services for the Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children, and I've been coming to the NAEYC conferences for a very long time, since the 80s. So I am so excited to be able to share with you today some information that I hope will make your conference day enjoyable, and hope that you'll make the most out of it. I'm here today with my colleague.
And I'm Deb Van Pelt. I'm the owner of Hemphill Family Child Development Center in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I think I've been to every conference since 1998. So have quite a few years that I've attended the annual conference.
So today our goal is to help you make the most of the NAEYC annual conference. And we've taken it into 4 specific categories: before you leave home, and then when you arrive, during your conference, and then what do you do when you return home? So let's get started. Before you leave home, as you start thinking about all the things that you need to do to prepare to come to the NAEYC conference, start to think about all the overall conference goals that you have. Are you looking for new information? Do you have new personal connections you want to make? Or is there a specific topic or focus or various interests that you want to gain more information on? When you decide to attend the NAEYC conference, why did you decide to come? Think about that as you consider planning for your conference. You also need to consider the type of presenter and the description cues that are given to us for the session types. They can be found in your preliminary schedule, as well as in your program book. And there's lots of different things to consider. Are you interested in a panel? What do a variety of people have to say about a particular topic? Or are you more interested in someone's research about a topic? Perhaps you like the personal journey or experiences kind of workshops. Those are the kind I like. Maybe you need to talk with someone very specifically and you'd like to attend a consultation session. You could also look at academic sessions. And then, of course, there's always the wonderful fun and light sessions, which you have to do at least 1 or 2. Things like Songs with Greg and Steve, or some of the science sessions. And then, of course, there's always sessions that are offered by the vendors and authors. So there's so many choices, but you really need to consider the type of things that you would like to talk about.
One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later is how to use the itinerary planner online. And in there, you will be able to click on the descriptions and get a little bit more detailed information about the background of the presenter. So use that to sort of identify whether you think it's going to be a highly academic session or something that's a little bit more fun and light. So there's a little bit of everything.
When you're planning your sessions, you also want to consider about a balance of topic areas that interest you for the conference goals. There are so many topics. We've just identified a few in this list, but there are so many topics of things that you can attend while you're at the conference. It's hard to believe if you can't find something that interests you. But take your time and kind of think about it. Are you more interested in the leadership or the personal development or the social emotional or science, et cetera, et cetera? And think about that, and you'll want to look at the various tracks. They are usually identified in your program according to, there's usually a place where it identifies them as tracks as well. So when you're planning your sessions, you have lots of things to help you do that. One of them that you might want to consider is the NAEYC conference app. It'll look a little different, but it's always a useful app. And there's places to get all the information that you need, to collect your information, to share with others. And it's an excellent opportunity. And if you need help with the conference app, they typically have a place where you can stop and someone can assist you with that. You can also think about using the conference itinerary planner, and you can find that in the you can find that information on the NAEYC website. You can go through all the sessions in the itinerary planner and then mark those that interest you, even if they're within the same time slot, because then you have an opportunity to see what things are going on in the same time slot and choose what you might want to choose between them. You can then go back and identify your first, second, and third choices in each time slot. And so, as I said, you can find the itinerary planner on the NAEYC website, that's NAEYC.org, and search Conference Itinerary Planner. This is an example of one of my past year's itinerary planners. And you can just get an idea of what that might look like for you as you plan your times. You can kind of set that aside and mark the things that you want to attend.
One of the things that I would suggest initially as you're going through the itinerary planner is don't worry so much about what days they're on or what time frames they're in. Just go through and check anything that interests you. I think you're going to find that there's probably 800 or so different sessions. So obviously you're going to have to make some choices and prioritize at some point. But initially I would just suggest going through and just simply checking anything that is interesting to you, or maybe presenters that you've heard about or that you're familiar with.
So you're getting ready. Time is drawing near. It's time to pack. So we'll want to pack for comfort and for networking. The first thing you want to make sure that you do is wear comfortable shoes and layer clothing. The conference center is very large. The sessions can be very far apart, and you'll do a lot of walking. So make sure you set your step counter because you will be doing a lot of walking. The conference center can be varied in temperature. Some classrooms may be very cold, some may be very warm. So consider layering your clothing to allow you to adjust to the temperature as necessary. You'll also want to consider packing a backpack or a shoulder sling or some kind of wheeled cart. The conference center, as I said, is very large, and you tend to accumulate a lot of paperwork, and if you're carrying your laptop or water bottles or other kinds of things, it becomes a little bit heavy. So we consider using one of those types of things. I personally use a backpack that converts to a wheeled cart. I found it a few years ago, and it's probably one of the best investments I ever made. You'll also want to consider bringing water and snacks with you. Water in the convention center, typically there are water coolers that you can fill water bottles with. There may not be, not every convention center has that, but water can be very expensive at the convention vendor area. So you might want to consider bringing an empty water bottle. And of course, bringing snacks along. Meals while you're traveling can get very expensive. And I personally am the kind of person who needs to have a munchie here and there, and it's a little bit more economical if you bring along a few snacks. And you might even want to consider, as Deb does, some things for breakfast.
Right. Just to reiterate, generally there's about a half-hour block of time between each session, and that seems like a lot, but sometimes it actually takes that long till you walk from one session to another. Restroom lines are usually pretty long, so if you can just have some of those snacks and water and things like that you can actually have while you're in the session or while you're walking, I think you'll find that will help speed your time up between sessions.
And you'll have plenty of energy to keep on going. You also want to consider bringing some business cards or perhaps name and address stickers if you don't have business cards. These are a good way to share your contact information with new colleagues that you meet and friends. And it's a good way to share that information without having to write it all out every time you meet somebody. You can exchange cards. So now you've arrived. Congratulations, you're at the conference. Travel from the airport to the hotel. As you begin to consider that, there are lots of ways. Obviously, if you're a frequent traveler, you'll know there's Uber and taxis and shuttles and all kinds of things you can convene a personal car to. Personally, this is a place where Deb and I frequently, maybe see people that we know are going to the conference. You can pretty much tell who we are. When you're headed to the NAEYC conference and you see people in the airport, you can kind of peg who they are. And you might want to consider sharing a taxi with a colleague, somebody new. You might want to consider the airport shuttles. The shuttle services often have some kind of discount for the NAEYC conference group. And of course, there's Uber. And I highly recommend that if you do use Uber, just try to share a ride with someone. You can cut the cost down as well as make a new friend. You'll also want to think about, once you get to the hotel, getting in and getting settled, find your room, refresh yourself and get all settled. Once you're settled, then you'll want to go and visit the convention center and pick up your final conference program. That can be found in the convention center at the registration area. Typically, there's large tables with conference attendees gathered around to get their program book and bag, if that's what they are doing. From year to year, sometimes they hand out materials and information in a bag. And so you kind of look around and get your program and think about that. As you walk back to your hotel, you'll want to consider area restaurants that you might want to visit while you're there. And then finally, as you settle in, you might want to think about spending some time scheduling your sessions and using whatever preferred method you would like to kind of sort through your program for your sessions. So Deb and I attack it in different ways. I'll let Deb tell you a little bit more about her choice of how she prefers to set up her conference.
So what I usually do once I get to the location and get my program booklet, this is where I have to prioritize. And so I go back through and look at all the sessions that I had interest in and look at the time blocks for each day. And in the back of the program booklet, there's usually a blank page or two, and that's where I just simply write in my itinerary. It's really nice because you're always carrying this booklet around and referring to it. And I find that if I just have all the information in one place, it just makes it so much easier for me to remember where I'm going. So I just simply write the day and the time block and the session number and the session title. And I usually put a second choice if I'm not sure about the first one, or sometimes they get canceled or it's not exactly what you want it to be. So I always I try to have a second choice. So on the left is just my handwritten itinerary for one of the more recent conferences.
I like to use the program app, and so I schedule my sessions on the program app. I do use my program book, but I use that more as just a general look through to see what I want to do. Sometimes I will, and you'll see throughout the conference, some people will have their conference book that'll sort of be what they go to for everything. People will use flags to tabs to flag what pages their sessions are on so they can look at them, refer back to them. Once I've gone through the program booklet, then I will start to plan my itinerary and then put that on my agenda on the app. And you'll notice on this, at the 1 o'clock time frame and actually down a little lower, you'll see that there are two sessions in the same time frame. And that's because I have been unable to decide which one I want to go to. So I will put multiple sessions in the same time frame, and I like that because it tells me exactly what the classroom location will be, and that's helpful to me because if I decide that at the last minute that I want to switch sessions, I know whether or not they are in close proximity to one another. So for me, that's useful. I can just plug it right into my app, and then I have it there, and you'll notice there's different days of the week. Each one comes up with an itinerary for the day. So planning and navigating the conference center. The convention centers can be very large and almost, if your first time, quite honestly, can be a little bit overwhelming. Don't be shocked by it. Understand that everybody is there for the same reason. We all have a vested interest in attending the conference and getting the most of the sessions. So don't be afraid to ask someone if you are struggling to find a location. But get familiar with the location of the floor plans, the exhibit hall, the entrance and the exits, and look for the ones that are closest to your hotel, because sometimes the closest exit or the main entrance may not be closest to your hotel. There may be a side entrance. Frequently, there are lots of entrance and exits out of the convention center, but look for one that's closest to your hotel. I always tell a story of the conference center in Washington, D.C. has this little hidden away subway shop across the street from one of the back entrances of the convention center. And it's my little tuck away to grab lunch, because a lot of people don't know it's there. But as I've learned about that convention center, I know where things are. So it's useful to kind of scope out the whole convention center and check out where your hotel, etc. If you're using buses, be sure to check the schedules, check the location drop-off, and don't forget to check your bus number. Not every bus goes to every hotel location, so be sure to check your bus for which one it's going to. And then don't forget, of course, to use the convention signs and staff to help you find rooms.
Yeah, I think the signage in the convention center is probably the most useful thing. And every convention center I've been to have done a really great job of having signs and directions. So you just, look for your numbers that you're going to. And if that struggle is a struggle for you, there's usually people around that can help. But use the signage.
That's a good point about signage. Another thing that you'll want to make sure that you pay attention to is from time to time, a conference session may get canceled or changed, the room location or something. And there's usually signs hanging that give you that information. But if you attend and go and you're in a classroom for a little while and nobody is there, be sure to go back and check a sign to find out if that session has been canceled. All right, so during the conference, now you're in the midst of it all. One of the first things that I think I recognized about attending the NAEYC conference was the opportunity that I had to meet new people. It is so exhilarating to me, even to this day, to go and to meet people from all across the U.S. and actually the world. Funny story about how Deb and I actually landed in doing this session. A year or 2 years ago, we met a young woman who was traveling to the conference for the first time. She was from Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And we were walking to get our program booklets, and she asked if we'd take her picture. So we said, sure. We took her picture in front of the NAEYC sign, and she was very excited to attend, and she was telling us it was her first time. So we started sharing some things that we knew and whatnot, and the 20 minutes turned into several hours, and we spent most of the afternoon together, and actually throughout the conference met up with her several times and had a nice friendship. Yeah, we've developed a nice friendship, and over the years then, and at one point she's like, hey, you guys should do a video. So here we are today. You want to have your business card ready, as I talked about earlier, to exchange with others. And remember that when you're getting your business cards from someone else, jot a little note on the back so that you remember what the key connections or interests were. Why did you take this person's card, and what interest do you have with them? And how might you want to reach out in the future? So,
several times you might be attending by yourself, or you might be coming with a group of coworkers from your organization. One of the things that you'll have to decide is it a benefit to attend sessions together, or is it better to spread yourselves out and try to get as many different sessions in that you can come back and share? I think there are times where there is a benefit in going to the same session with a coworker because you're hearing the same thing and you can bounce ideas off of each other and then bring them back to your work. And then there's other times that, spreading yourselves out. Like I said before, there's, hundreds of sessions, and it might be beneficial to spread yourselves out so you're getting lots of different pieces of information that you can then come back and share with each other.
You'll also, of course, goes without saying, that you'll need some kind of system for recording notes in your sessions. You can think about using the NAEYC app, as I do, your laptop, of course, a notepad, all of those types of things. The thing we want to make sure that you're aware of is that in some sessions, you might be inclined to take photographs of the presenter slides. Please be respectful and recognize, first of all, if the presenter is comfortable with you taking photos of the slides, and be comfortable or be aware, cognizant of individuals who are in the room when you are taking photographs. Some individuals may not wish to have their pictures spread about, so be cautious about that.
Generally, the presenters will let you know at the beginning of the session if they do not want pictures taken.
Good point. Handouts, you'll have the opportunity for lots of handouts. You also will note that some presenters may not actually have handouts. They could potentially send them to you after the event. They will collect names and email addresses and send them after the event. Some people will have them there. Sometimes there's not enough because, everybody can choose things differently. And so just pay attention to that. And it's only necessary to take them if you really, truly want them. You don't feel inclined to take them if you don't want them. It's okay. So some of the things that I think that we want to make sure that seem like a given, but we want to make sure that you are aware of, always be respectful of others in the group and the presenter. Make sure your mobile devices are muted. If you take a phone call, please leave the room. We all have lives and families. We may be caring for children or elderly family members, or we just have lots of work on our plate at work that we have to address. And it's fine to take a call. Just be cautious of that and leave the room to have a conversation. Try to avoid sidebar conversations during the session, and this can be hard to do sometimes because something sparks your interest, you say something to someone sitting next to you, but just be cognizant of that.
So one of the things that I remember from the very first year that I went to the conference is going to the session and seeing people get up in the middle of the session and leave. And I was stunned, actually. I thought it was very rude and disrespectful. And then the more I thought about it and realized, everybody's paying lots of money and taking their time to come to the sessions. And there's, like I said, there's many, and you can only go to a handful. I realized that's okay. It's okay to get up and leave a session. Sometimes you come into a session and it just simply isn't what you were expecting it to be, or maybe you mistakenly got into the wrong one for some reason. So it is okay to decide to leave the session. We just ask that you be mindful of the presenter and the people that are leading it, that you do it as discreetly as possible. One of the things I always do, if I go into a session that I'm not 100% sure it's what I want, is I make sure that I sit in the back and along an aisle, so that when I do get up and leave, I'm not blocking people's views and disrupting the presentation.
If you do leave, you need to consider a backup session. Think about what you would do if you do make a change. Consider its proximity to your first session that you've chosen. And also consider the time, if you do choose to leave a session, you might choose to use that time as a networking opportunity time. There's always people that are not in sessions. So use the time wisely as you think about making a change. Consider how you might deal with that time if you do make a change.
And another option is to go to the exhibit hall. That's always another option, and of course, during that time.
also go to the restroom because there's less lines. During the session breaks, the lines, as Deb said earlier, can be really long. So each evening, think about the day, kind of debrief your brain and review your notes, date and label any handouts. I tend to label my handouts with the date and time of the session, so I have an idea of where, when I get back home, to jog my memory about what was going on. And then organize any of your materials for any future reference. There we go. Sorry. Planning your time in the exhibit hall. As you plan the system to go through the exhibit hall, just think about, we highly recommend that you think about it and you plan, you make a strategy for attacking the exhibit hall. It is amazing, overwhelming, wonderful, exciting, and exhausting all at the same time. You might want to consider I love the way that Deb attacks the exhibit hall. So I'm going to let her tell you about that.
Okay, so what you'll find is the exhibit hall opens usually on a Wednesday after the keynote. And everybody, the thousands and thousands of people that attend, usually want to get into the exhibit hall that evening. So there's a big long line, and then they open the doors, and there's just mass entrance into the hall. What I tend to do, you don't have to do it this way, but it's helpful for me, is I go that evening. I spend the 2 hours there, but I always just turn to the right and start going up and down the aisle, not really spending a whole lot of time at any particular vendor. I'm just really getting the lay of the land and looking to see what I might be interested in coming back to. So I usually can get through the entire hall in those 2 hours, but then I mark the ones that I specifically want to go back and spend more time, so that when I do have a little bit of time between sessions, or if there is a session I end up not going to, then I target, when I go back into the hall, I target those particular places. But the first night, I really just walk up and down the aisles and check it out.
So I think something that you want to consider, as when you are first going into the exhibit hall, often the vendors have lots of things to give away. And so, thinking about that as you move through the exhibit hall and planning your system to go through that exhibit hall. You don't need to take everything that is offered to you. Feel free to say no. If you have an interest in it or a need for a product, please go ahead and take it. And vendors, sometimes some of the vendors will only have certain big products that they will give away at the beginning. Some of them will have smaller things they will give away. You might get 50,000 pens. Maybe that's an exaggeration. But, lots of pens, lots of handout of product and whatnot. Sometimes people have bags that they give away. Just take what you need. You might want to consider, if you purchase something from a vendor, because there will be vendors who sell their product, and if you choose to purchase something, you might want to consider having the items shipped. It can be very difficult to transport things back home. Deb has a little surefire way of doing that, though.
Well, the very first conference that I went to was in Anaheim. And that year there was a vendor that was giving out these huge red and yellow vinyl bags, carry bags. And I think I have 3 of them, because every time I went into the hall, I got another one, and I filled it with everything that was offered. I took it. And I do remember that year there were a lot of vendors that were giving not just samples, but regular size things. I think I had 3 bottles of regular size paint, which is heavy. And I put these in the bags, and when I went to pack to go home, I had 2 full bags brimming with things, in addition to my luggage and everything else that I brought out. And I'll never forget getting into the airplane to go back to Baltimore, and I'm guessing about 75% of the airplane were passengers that had come from the conference, and we all had these big yellow and red bags. And it was just comical to see us all trying to figure out how to get them into the overhead bins or under the seat fronts, and it just wasn't working very well. So I learned my lesson. First of all, you do not have to take everything that's offered, so I just simply say no a lot. And then the things that I do take, one suggestion or one thing that has worked for me is I tend to bring snacks and breakfast foods. So I will pack that in my luggage that I check in, but then on the way home, obviously I've consumed that, so there's some empty space, and that's where I put a lot of my stuff that I've collected at the exhibit hall so that I'm not actually carrying it on the plane.
You know, the airplane, I can just imagine the airplane coming home. You know, there were 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 bottles of paint that were left behind on that airplane.
Well, now we probably wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, now they probably couldn't do that anymore. You'll also, as I said earlier, want to consider a wheeled bag. In the vendor area, that's where the wheeled bag comes in handy, because it can get very heavy to carry all of the, even just the papers and the booklets, etc., the catalogs that you may get. Those kinds of things can be very cumbersome to carry. You'll also want to consider bringing along any name, address stickers to share your information with vendors. Most vendors in the exhibit area will have a little scan tool that they can scan your badge and collect your information so they can send you information at a later time. But from time to time, smaller vendors may not pay for that additional resource at the conference, and they may not actually scan badges. So an address sticker is a useful tool for yourself, so you don't have to write out their little information pieces. Using the exhibit hall to plan, using the maps in the back of your program are a useful tool. Sometimes we will make notes on those about what vendors are where, so that we know when we go back on our day 2 to which vendors that we're going to highlight.
One little tip that I would suggest is bring a couple highlighters and use those in your program booklet. And this is one thing I do on the expo map, is I will just highlight specific booths that I definitely want to make sure I go back to. So, conference is over. It's time to head home. So thinking about what you will do when you return home with the information that you have. Taking the NAEYC conference home with you can be just as important as attending the conference. Think about how you will use the knowledge that you gained when you return home. Share the handouts with your colleagues or coworkers. Share information at a staff meeting. I find that a good way to help you kind of process through all of the information is to prepare and share that information at a staff meeting. You might even want to develop a professional development for your team based on the things that you've learned. One of the things that I do every year is I will just do a compilation of some key notes that I've taken that really are relevant to the work that I do at my center. And at a staff meeting, I will have a handout that's just simply bringing NAEYC home. And I give that to everyone and take a little time to go over it so that my staff feel that they are benefiting from the conference through me attending.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, and if your employer is paying for your trip to the NAEYC conference, it's always good to give them some feedback as to what you learned while you were at the conference. If their dollars are paying for the conference, then it's important to share that information with them. You'll also want to make sure that you follow up with any contacts that you made at the conference. You know, it's always nice to just jot a note. I just spoke to a colleague I met yesterday. We've never actually seen one another, but we've spoken, and I'm looking forward to talking with her at the conference and actually meeting her for the first time. So, you know, thinking about those follow-ups that you may have for the future. Exploring any websites of companies or programs that you learned about or things that you learned at the conference. It's a good opportunity to follow up afterwards and check out their websites. And most importantly, stay connected to NAEYC through your local or state affiliate. If you don't know who your local or state affiliate, you can find that information on the NAEYC website by going to Get Connected, and then you can find a list of all the state affiliates or local, a local affiliate if that's the case, to stay connected to. Get involved. Be involved in your NAEYC organization, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference. Our contact information is attached, and you have the information there. If you want to reach out to us, feel free to do so. You can contact us. Our emails are there. If you have questions specifically about preparing for the NAEYC conference, or perhaps any specific questions related to that. And of course, if you have general information about the NAEYC conference as a whole, please contact the conference at conference@naeyc.org. And if you see us at the conference, please be sure to say hi. We'd love to meet new friends.
Enjoy your time.
Yep, thank you.